In space, no one can hear you scream, but they sure can hear you complain. That's why Captain Jackson had barred all whining on the bridge of the Resolute, which, ironically, was named right before its first mission went sideways and ended up in this back alley section of the Ringworld, where anarchy had set up shop and put its feet up. "I swear if that blinking light isn't a disco ball, I'm going to lose it," muttered Cass, the ship's engineer and part-time doomsayer. Her hair was tied in a knot that resembled a small, disheveled bird's nest, a fitting metaphor for her state of mind. "Relax, Cass. Maybe it's just the universe's way of giving us a light show," Jackson quipped, leaning back in his captain's chair with a nonchalance that only comes from countless bad decisions narrowly avoided or survived. "Or maybe it's the ship's way of telling us we've finally hit the big one," chimed in Rook, the pilot who looked more like he belonged in a rock band than at the helm of a starship. His jacket was adorned with patches from places that were better off forgotten. "A big deposit of dark matter, and we're the lucky bastards who found it," Jackson added, flashing a grin that had conned its way out of more bar fights than most folks dared get into. The Resolute had stumbled upon a rich dark matter deposit, a cosmic jackpot in the scarred landscape of the Ringworld. Of course, with their luck, it had probably come with a side of impending doom. "Let's just hope it doesn't come with a curse," Cass said, her fingers dancing over the console as she tried to coax some life into it. The ship had been displaying all the grace and elegance of a drunken uncle at a wedding. "Curses are just yesterday's poorly constructed tech," Rook replied with a smirk. "Besides, what's the worst that could happen?" As if summoned by the universe's cruel sense of humor, the lights flickered, casting the bridge in a strobe of uneasy shadows. The ship groaned like a hungover giant waking up in a strange bed. "There it is," Cass sighed. "The universe's middle finger served just for us." Jackson leaned forward, the grin wiped clean off his face. "All right, folks, get serious. If this is a haunting, I want us to be the ghosts that haunt back." The truth was, Jackson had seen enough of space's weirdness to know this was just the beginning of something they probably wouldn't walk away from. But hey, it wasn't the first time he'd stared down the abyss, and it likely wouldn't be the last. The crew went about their duties with the kind of resigned determination that only comes from knowing that the situation is well and truly screwed. But they were pros at this. The galaxy's misfit toys, thrown together by fate or lunacy, running on caffeine and sarcasm. "Life support's stable for now," Cass reported, her voice tinged with the eternal optimism of someone who knew things could always get worse. "Good to know we won't suffocate while getting scared to death," Jackson replied, scanning the room for any signs of the mysterious entity messing with their ship. Rook hit a few buttons, bringing up a holographic display of the Ringworld section they found themselves in. "This place is a ghost town, nothing but busted tech and forgotten dreams. And dark matter," Jackson reminded him. "Which is why we're sticking around." It was then that the ship shuddered, a deep, resounding thud echoing through the hull. The kind of sound that usually meant something expensive was about to break. "Great, now what?" Cass muttered, already on her feet and heading for the maintenance hatch. Jackson followed, noticing the flickering light had grown more erratic, casting the corridor in a dance of chiaroscuro that would have been artistic if it wasn't so damned ominous. "I think the ship's having an existential crisis," Rook commented, trailing behind with the practiced ease of someone who'd long ago given up being surprised by anything. They reached the maintenance bay to find one of the energy conduits sparking like a firework. Cass set to work, tools appearing in her hands as if by magic. "It's like the ship's trying to communicate," Jackson mused aloud, watching her work. "It's saying screw you loud and clear," Cass replied, her tone as dry as the go-by desert. Perfectly in line with the rest of the universe. As Cass wrestled with the recalcitrant machinery, Jackson couldn't help but think of the legends he'd heard whispered in smoky bars and back-alley missions like this one, stories of ships that went haywire, run by invisible forces or the restless dead looking for a ride. You think there's something to these stories about haunted ships? Jackson asked, not really expecting an answer. If there's a ghost, it's probably just as fed up as we are, Cass grunted, yanking a wire into place with a force that suggested it owed her money. Rook, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, looked contemplative. A ghost might be preferable to another hole in the hull. At least they don't bill you. The lights steadied and the ship's groaning subsided. For now. See. All it took was a little tough love, Cass said, wiping her hands on her overalls with a satisfaction that was only partly forced. Jackson nodded, though his mind was elsewhere. The dark matter deposit was close, but something was telling him that getting to it wouldn't be as simple as a bit of cosmic spelunking. Rook's face appeared over Jackson's shoulder, grinning like a Cheshire cat. So, Captain, what's the plan? We hanging around here to see if the ship starts singing show tunes or what? We keep moving, Jackson declared, more to himself than anyone else. The darkness outside the ship loomed like a predator, and Jackson couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them from the depths of the Ringworld's mechanical jungle. Back on the bridge, the console chirped, a cheerful sound that was completely at odds with the ominous atmosphere. Cass tapped a few buttons, her brow furrowing. Captain, we've got readings all over the place. It's like the sensors can't decide if they're picking up dark matter or the ghost of Christmas past. Or maybe both, Jackson said, squinting at the readouts. At least we know one thing's for sure, Rook chimed in, pointing at the data streaming across the screen. Yeah, what's that? Jackson asked, already knowing he wouldn't like the answer. That we're in for one hell of a ride, Rook replied, his grin unyielding. As the Resolute pressed on deeper into the Ringworld's forgotten section, the crew couldn't shake the feeling that they were being led somewhere. Somewhere that probably had bad idea written all over it. Jackson leaned back in his chair, watching the stars outside the viewport swirl in their dispassionate beauty. He knew that whatever lay ahead, they'd face it the same way they always had, together, with a healthy dose of sarcasm and an unhealthy lack of caution. All right, everyone, Jackson announced, snapping back to the present. Let's see if we can't turn this haunted hayride into a payday. Cass rolled her eyes, but she was smiling, in that way people do when they are about to do something incredibly stupid. And if not, at least we'll have a story. The ship's engines hummed a steady tune as they powered forward into the unknown. And as the darkness closed in around them, the crew couldn't help but wonder if they were about to become part of the very stories they used to laugh at. But then again, who were they kidding? This was the Resolute. If there was one thing they were good at, it was surviving the universe's worst practical jokes. The Resolute cruised deeper into the Ringworld's forgotten alley, where the universe is lost and found tossed its rejects. Jackson leaned back in his chair, one eye on the console, the other on Cass, who was already grumbling under her breath about the next disaster waiting to unfold. So, how close are we to our cosmic treasure? Jackson asked, trying to sound chipper, but it came out like a man trying to convince himself the noose was just a fancy necklace. Close enough to smell it, Cass replied, her fingers dancing over the controls like a pianist in a bar that paid in whiskey shots. But I'm more worried about the ship's mood swings. It's like it's auditioning for a soap opera. Soap opera or horror flick, Rook chimed in, spinning lazily in his chair. I swear I heard whispering in the air ducts. Maybe the ship's developing a personality. Just what we need, a ship with emotional baggage, Jackson muttered. All right, let's get this mining operation rolling, before the universe decides where its next punchline. Cass nodded, though her expression suggested she was mentally writing her last will and testament. Deploying the mining drones now. The drones, squat little machines with all the charm of a trash compactor, zipped out into the inky void towards the dark matter deposit. They buzzed around like a swarm of mechanical bees, ready to sting the cosmos itself. All right, little guys, do your thing, Cass murmured, watching the monitors closely. Just don't wake the neighbors, Rook added, ever the optimist. Last thing we need is some ancient alien overlord popping out to complain about the noise. Minutes stretched into an eternity as the drones did their work, the crew's nerves strung taut as a cheap guitar. Jackson found himself tapping his fingers on the armrest, a habit he'd picked up during long hauls and even longer waits. "Everything looks stable," Cass announced, not quite believing her own words. "For now, let me guess there's a but coming up," Jackson asked, leaning forward. But, Cass confirmed, the ship's power levels are fluctuating. It's like it's trying to decide if it wants to keep the lights on or give us a surprise light show. "Fantastic," Jackson sighed. "Let's just hope it doesn't decide to throw in some fireworks for free." Then, as if the universe couldn't resist the temptation, the lights flickered again, casting eerie shadows across the bridge. The ship groaned, a deep, unsettling sound that reverberated through the hull. "There's that middle finger again," Cass said, her voice a mix of frustration and resignation. Before Jackson could respond, the lights went out completely, plunging them into darkness. The silence that followed was more unnerving than the noise. "Great, the universe has a sense of humor," Rook joked, though his voice was tight. "Anyone got a flashlight? Preferably one that doesn't require a seance to work." Jackson fumbled around in the dark, grateful for the emergency lights that flickered on, bathing everything in a sickly red glow. "All right, team, let's get this ship back on its feet." Cass was already moving, her silhouette barely visible in the gloom as she made her way to the control panel. Rook, ever the opportunist, decided to take a nap, or at least pretend to, stretched out like a cat in a sunbeam. "Looks like a power surge," Cass reported, her voice punctuated by the sound of clanging tools. "And not the fun kind." "Fun is a relative term," Jackson replied, shaking his head. "Let's just hope it doesn't become relative to our lifespan." As if on cue, the ship shuddered, a deep rumble that shook the floor under their feet. It felt like something was trying to get in or out. "That can't be good," Cass said, her fingers flying over the keys, trying to coax the ship back to life. "No kidding," Jackson muttered, trying to ignore the way his skin prickled like someone was watching him. But who? Or what? And then he saw her. Standing at the edge of his vision, just outside the reach of the emergency lights, was a figure. A woman in a pilot's uniform, her eyes hollow, her face a mask of sorrow and longing. Lieutenant Iris Faulkner, a name he hadn't thought of in years, a ghost from his past, quite literally if this kept up. "Iris?" Jackson whispered, his voice barely audible over the hum of the ship. The figure didn't respond, just watched him with eyes that saw too much and said too little. "Jax, you okay?" Rook's voice cut through the fog of Jackson's thoughts. "I'm fine," Jackson lied, shaking his head to dispel the apparition. "Just thought I saw something." "I'd say you're seeing things, but given our luck, you might actually be onto something," Rook replied, his tone more amused than concerned. Jackson glanced back, but the figure was gone, leaving only the unsettling feeling that something was very wrong. The ship's systems flickered back to life, the lights brightening with all the enthusiasm of a dying light bulb. Cass gave a sigh of relief, her shoulders relaxing ever so slightly. "Looks like we're back in business," she announced, though her voice lacked conviction. "Great, now let's get this dark matter on board before the ship decides to throw a tantrum again," Jackson said, forcing himself to focus on the task at hand. The ghost, real or imagined, would have to wait. As the mining drones completed their task, the ship vibrated with the promise of profit and peril. The dark matter was secured, a swirling mass of potential and power that sat nestled in the cargo bay like a dragon's hoard. "Now, let's just hope it doesn't come with a curse," Cass muttered, eyeing the readouts with suspicion. Jackson chuckled, though the sound was hollow. "If it does, we'll add it to the list." With the ship stable for now, they set a course to leave this haunted section of the Ringworld behind. But as they prepared to depart, Jackson's mind drifted back to the vision of Iris. There was a connection here, one he couldn't yet grasp, but it was as if the universe was whispering secrets just out of reach. "Ever get the feeling we're missing something?" Jackson asked, more to himself than anyone else. Cass looked up from her console, her eyes thoughtful. "Only every day. But we're still breathing, so I'd call that a win." Rook, always the cheerleader of sarcastic optimism, chimed in. And hey, maybe the universe is just shy, doesn't want to give away all its mysteries at once. Yeah, or maybe it's just waiting for the right moment to drop the anvil, Jackson replied, his gaze drifting to the stars outside, wondering what lay hidden in the dark. As the Resolute moved away from the deposit, leaving a trail of exhaust and existential dread, the crew settled back into their routines, each lost in their thoughts. Jackson couldn't shake the feeling that Iris's appearance was more than a figment of his imagination. There was a message there, something he needed to understand before it was too late. For now, though, they had survived another day in the universe's chaotic orchestra, and that was more than most could say. "All right, let's get out of here before the ghosts start offering us drinks," Jackson announced, his voice laced with false bravado. Cass and Rook nodded, each knowing that in this galaxy the line between reality and nightmare was thinner than a razor's edge. But they were the crew of the Resolute, and if anyone could navigate the universe's twisted sense of humor, it was them. As the ship powered through the void, Jackson leaned back, a wry smile playing on his lips. At least we'll have one hell of a story to tell. And as the darkness of space enveloped them, the crew couldn't help but wonder if they'd really left the ghosts behind, or if they were simply bringing them along for the ride. Because in the end, the universe was one big haunted house, and they were just trying to find the exit before it all came crashing down. The Resolute, a ship that seemed to be held together more by the sheer stubbornness of its crew than by any engineering marvel, lurched forward. Its internal systems, temperamental as a teenager denied screen time, flickered ominously, each dissonant beep and clunk a reminder that it existed to serve Murphy's Law more than any captain's log. Jackson sat in the command chair, feet kicked up in a pose of lazy defiance. He was trying to look like the sort of captain who never broke a sweat, even when knee-deep in interstellar refuse. In truth, he was more like a man trying to look relaxed in a massage chair that was off its meds. The bridge, with its dim lighting and the soft hum of untrustworthy machinery, was just one more shade of dreary. "Cass, let's have a look at the data logs. I want to know why our girl keeps throwing tantrums," Jackson said, trying to inject some casual optimism into his tone, but coming off about as sincere as a used spaceship salesman. "Already ahead of you, Captain," came the retort. Cass, the ship's navigator and reluctant therapist, was busy dissecting the latest stream of diagnostic failures. Rook, the ship's resident comic relief and general-purpose button pusher, was sprawled in his chair, feet tapping a rhythm of disinterest. Maybe we're cursed. Or maybe, just maybe, the ship's haunted by the ghost of better days. Wouldn't be the first time, right? Jackson muttered, sparking a memory of Iris Faulkner's spectral visit. Ghosts of past crew members or a product of overworked imagination and underwhelming rations. "Captain," Cass interrupted, "we might want to bring in Talia. She's the only one who understands the engine's mood swings." "Great idea," Jackson replied, already on his feet. "And while we're at it, maybe we can get her to perform an exorcism on this damn ship." Down in the guts of the Resolute, where the air was thick with the musk of mechanical depression, Talia Voss was elbow-deep in the ship's entrails. Talia, the engineer with the social skills of a hangry porcupine, was doing her best to keep the Resolute from running away with its own circuits. Jackson appeared at the entryway, looking like a man on the verge of asking for yet another favor. "Talia, how's our girl doing?" Talia didn't even look up, her attention on a particularly stubborn piece of machinery. "Oh, she's peachy. Just considering a career change. Maybe as a fancy paperweight." Cass mentioned you might want to look at the data logs. "We've got some ghosts, possibly of the metaphorical variety, causing a ruckus." Talia snorted, wiping her hands on a rag that was beyond hope. "Metaphorical ghosts, huh? Well, they'd make better company than half the people I know." Jackson handed her a tablet, the ship's latest confessions glowing on the screen. Talia studied the data like a detective examining a crime scene. "These fluctuations are weird even for us. And that's saying something. Maybe past experiences are bleeding into the present, Jackson suggested, though the idea sounded as crazy as it felt. Or the ship's just tired of our nonsense, Talia shrugged. But let's go with your theory. It's more fun. While Talia worked her magic, Jackson's mind drifted back to the vision of Iris he'd seen. That grin of hers, half reassuring, half warning, seemed etched into his memory. If there was a message buried beneath layers of cosmic interference, he had to decipher it before it went from annoying to lethal. Just then, the ship's communicator buzzed with an incoming message, crackling with static. Jackson slapped it into compliance. "Mahir, this is Captain Crix of the Korath Syndicate," said a voice, smooth and oily as intergalactic snake oil. "We have noticed your little mining operation and thought we'd introduce ourselves." Jackson rolled his eyes. Of course, as if the universe wasn't already crowded enough, now they had company. Well, that's just swell. "But sorry, we're not in the mood for sales pitches." A chuckle oozed through the speaker. "Oh, but I insist. You see, you've stumbled upon our claim and we have a standing policy of dealing with trespassers." Jackson's patience, never his strong suit, was wearing thinner than a bargain bin spacesuit. "Listen, Crix, we found it first. Finders keepers, right?" "Ah, Captain Ma, but we subscribe to a different philosophy." "Might makes right," Crix replied, malevolence tucked neatly behind his words. "Well then," Jackson said, "I guess we'll just have to disagree. Politely, of course." The line went dead, leaving a silence that was both oppressive and anticipatory, as if the universe was holding its breath, waiting for the next act of cosmic comedy or tragedy. Back on the bridge, Cass and Rook were already on high alert, their expressions mirroring the kind of enthusiasm one might reserve for an unexpected dental appointment. "Just got a call from the Korath Syndicate," Jackson announced. "Apparently they think they've got dibs on our little treasure." Rook's face lit up with mock excitement. "Oh, goody. I do love a good neighborly dispute over astronomical resources." Cass rolled her eyes. "And here I thought today would be boring." "Let's not get ahead of ourselves," Jackson said. "They're not going to scare us off. But it wouldn't hurt to keep an eye on them." "Sure thing, Captain." "I'll set the sensors to snoop mode," Cass replied, her fingers already dancing over the controls. Jackson leaned back in his chair, the weight of the ship's troubles and the extra baggage of his own past pressing down on him. Iris's image flickered in his mind like a faulty hologram, her message as elusive as ever. "We're not backing down," Jackson declared, more to himself than anyone else. "Not from ghosts, and definitely not from some two-bit syndicate." Spoken like a man who's never met a problem he couldn't make worse, Rook quipped, earning a rare grin from Cass. "If you're looking for a motivational speaker, Rook, I'm afraid you're in the wrong line of work," Jackson shot back. As the Resolute plowed through the emptiness of space, a plan began to take shape in Jackson's mind. If they wanted the dark matter, they had to play smarter, not harder. And if Iris's ghost had anything to offer, now would be a hell of a time for her to spill the beans. The ship's internal comms crackled, Talia's voice coming through like a caffeine-fueled oracle. "Captain, I've found something. Looks like the ship's got some old logs, possibly from Iris's time, buried deep in its memory. Let's see what secrets she's hiding," Jackson replied, his curiosity piqued. Minutes later, the crew gathered in the cramped meeting room, the lights dimmed to match the ominous mood. Talia hooked up the data to the main screen, the logs flickering to life. Jackson watched, his heart doing a little tap dance in his chest, as Iris's face appeared on the screen. Her expression was serious, her voice calm yet tinged with urgency. "This is Lieutenant Iris Faulkner," her recorded message began. "If you're seeing this, it means I've failed to resolve the issues plaguing the Resolute. The ship's memory banks are compromised, and the fluctuations are linked to an anomaly we discovered, a relic of ancient technology." "Well, that's new," Rook muttered, his eyes glued to the screen. Iris continued, "I couldn't decipher the relic's purpose, but it has a deep connection to the ship. If left unchecked, it could lead to catastrophic failure." Jackson absorbed the words, the pieces of a puzzle he hadn't realized he was solving falling into place. Iris had been trying to protect the ship, and by extension her crew. But fate, as usual, had other plans. "So we're sitting on a ticking time bomb," Cass summarized, her voice carrying the weight of undesirable truths. Jackson nodded. "Looks like it. And with the Korath Syndicate breathing down our necks, we've got ourselves a lovely little nightmare. Do we have any idea how to disarm said bomb?" Rook asked, his humor masking genuine concern. Talia shook her head. "Not yet, but I'm working on it. If there's a way to untangle this mess, I'll find it." Jackson clapped her on the shoulder. "I know you will. And in the meantime, we'll keep the Syndicate busy." As the crew dispersed, each returning to their stations, Jackson lingered, staring at Iris's frozen image on the screen. Whatever connection she had to the ship, he needed to understand it, and fast. The Resolute, with its quirks and malfunctions, was more than just a vessel. It was a testament to the resilience of those who sailed it, a relic in its own right, and a mystery wrapped in an enigma masquerading as a death trap. Jackson took a deep breath, ready to face whatever the universe had in store. After all, courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was doing what needed to be done, even when the odds were about as favorable as a snowball's chance in a fusion reactor. "All right, team," he called over the comms, "let's strap in and show the universe what the crew of the Resolute is made of." With an uncertain future hanging over them like a storm cloud in space, Jackson couldn't help but grin. Life on the edge was all he'd ever known, and if nothing else, at least it was never boring. The Resolute was a ship only a mother could love, if mothers were fond of rust, stubborn circuitry, and an aura that screamed, "I dare you." Nestled in its dimly lit bridge, Captain Jackson was trying to channel the cool detachment of a jazz musician who'd just realized he was playing in a bar full of angry bikers. The task at hand: pretend like he had any control over the situation. "You know," Rook said from his perch by the controls, fiddling with a button that probably didn't need fiddling, "it's a good day if the only thing that tries to kill us is the power surge from the coffee maker. Not going to lie, I'd take that over our current predicament," Cass muttered, her fingers a blur over the nav console. She had the look of someone who desperately needed a vacation or strong sedative, possibly both. "Focus, folks," Jackson said, trying to sound authoritative. "We've got more pressing concerns than burnt caffeine." As if on cue, the ship shuddered, the grumpy rumble of its engine suggesting it was less than thrilled about the day's agenda. Talia had undoubtedly given them the equivalent of a pep talk, mostly cursing and threats of a wrench lobotomy. An alarm blared, cutting through the tension with all the subtlety of a space opera. Cass's eyes flicked to the screen. "Incoming, Captain. Looks like the Korath Syndicate decided to drop by for tea and a hostile takeover." "Fantastic," Jackson grumbled. "Not even a "we'll be in the neighborhood" courtesy call." The intercom crackled to life, the voice of Captain Crick slinking through like a snake in a bad mood. "Captain we thought we'd help ourselves to what you've so generously found." "Generosity's not really our thing," Jackson shot back. "In fact, we're downright stingy." A pause, then Crick's voice oozed with amusement. "Let's see how stingy you are when my ships start dismantling yours." "Great," Rook said, his sarcasm as thick as molasses. "We get to be the universe's most expensive Lego set." "Shields up," Jackson ordered, feeling the weight of the impending chaos press down on him. "Let's give them a proper Resolute welcome." The stars outside the viewport danced with the harsh light of incoming fire. The Resolute's shields flared like a neon sign on its last legs, flickering under the barrage. Somewhere in the belly of the beast, something sparked with the enthusiasm of a jaded fireworks display. "Shields holding, but only just," Cass reported, her tone suggesting the word only was doing a lot of heavy lifting. "Weapons hot," Rook chimed in, his grin the kind you'd expect from someone who enjoyed trouble a bit too much. "Return fire," Jackson commanded, clenching his fists as if it might somehow help the ship endure. The Resolute spat back with what felt like the universe's most underwhelming counterattack, a bit like throwing pebbles at a tank. Talia's voice burst over the comms, frantic, and filled with the kind of urgency you'd expect from someone trying to defuse a bomb with a spaghetti spoon. Jackson, you might want to know the fluctuations are getting worse. If you've ever had faith in a plan, now's the time to use it. No pressure then, Jackson muttered under his breath. His mind raced, trying to piece together a strategy from the tangled mess of his thoughts. Captain, Cass interrupted, her eyes showing a spark of an idea. What if we use the anomaly Iris mentioned, the one linked to the ship? Might give us an edge if we can control it, control an unknown ancient relic while under attack. Sure, how hard can that be? Rook said with a snort, clearly enjoying the absurdity. Jackson rubbed his temples. We've got no choice. Talia, can you get us access to whatever this thing is? Already working on it. Just don't do anything too stupid while I'm saving your asses, she replied, a hint of a grin in her voice despite the chaos. As the Resolute continued to take a beating, Jackson felt the pressure mount. His crew was looking to him for answers, and all he had were questions, mostly rhetorical and unrepeatable in polite company. Another blast rocked the ship, sending a shower of sparks dancing across the bridge. The air smelled of burnt metal and ozone, the signature scent of a space battle going horribly wrong. Time to step up our game, Jackson said, more to himself than anyone else. Cass, see if you can open a channel to Iris's ghost. Cass looked at him like he'd just suggested they solve their problems with interpretative dance. You want me to talk to a ghost during a firefight? You've got a better idea, she sighed, reluctantly tapping into the ship's systems with a mix of desperation and resignation. The ghostly presence of Iris Faulkner lingered somewhere in the ship, like an old habit that refused to be kicked, and Jackson was determined to exploit it. The air seemed to grow colder, an unnatural chill that prickled the skin and sent a shiver down the spine. Jackson hoped it was Iris's way of making contact rather than the ship's heating system giving up the ghost, pun intended. A flicker on the screen, a faint overlay of static, then Iris's image appeared once more, her expression unreadable. She looked like she was about to deliver the punchline to a very bad joke. Jackson, Iris's voice said, ghostly and distant, you're in quite the predicament. Yeah, well, we've got a knack for that, Jackson replied, managing a smirk despite himself. The anomaly can be harnessed, but it requires a connection. One that only the captain can make, Iris explained, her tone both cryptic and oddly reassuring. A connection. Jackson echoed, trying to wrap his head around the implications. Think of it as a handshake with the universe, Iris said, her image flickering again. Or a really awkward dance. Great, I'm about as coordinated as a one-legged duck, Jackson muttered, earning a chuckle from Rook. Cass turned from her console, her expression serious. Captain, if there's a chance this could work, I think you should try. We're running out of options. Okay, Jackson said, taking a deep breath. Let's do this. How do I make this connection? Iris's image shimmered, her voice now tinged with urgency. You need to let go of your fear, Jackson. Fear's the chain that binds you and the ship. Let go of fear. Easy for a ghost to say, Jackson grumbled, but there was something in Iris's gaze that made him pause. He closed his eyes, drawing in a breath that seemed to carry the weight of the galaxy. Letting go of fear was like trying to put toothpaste back in the tube, but he had to try. The ship trembled, a sensation that went beyond the physical, something deeper, as if the Resolute itself was reaching out, searching for its captain's resolve. Now, Jackson, Iris's voice urged, the sound like a whisper in his mind. And then, as if a switch had been flipped, Jackson felt a surge of energy, a connection that hummed through him, through the ship, a vivid electric sensation that was both terrifying and exhilarating. The Resolute responded, its systems flaring to life with renewed vigor. The screens blazed with data, the engines roared, and the shields pulsed with a strength that defied their previous fragility. Captain, whatever you're doing, keep doing it, Cass said, her voice filled with awe and disbelief. Looks like we've got a fighting chance, Talia added, her tone lighter, buoyed by the unexpected turn of events. Jackson opened his eyes, a sense of clarity washing over him. The fear that had gripped him was gone, replaced by a steely determination. "Let's show the Syndicate what happens when you mess with the Resolute," he declared, feeling every bit the captain he was supposed to be. The ship's weapons blazed, tearing through the void with a precision and power that belied its previous struggles. The Korath ships faltered, caught off guard by the unexpected resistance. "Now we're talking," Rook cheered, his fingers dancing over the controls as the Resolute fought back with renewed vigor. The tide was turning, but Jackson knew they weren't out of the woods yet. The connection to the anomaly was a double-edged sword, its power as unpredictable as it was formidable. He needed to tread carefully or risk being consumed by the very force he sought to control. As the battle raged on, the Resolute carved a path through the stars, defying the odds and challenging fate itself. The crew fought with the kind of reckless abandon that only came from knowing you had nothing left to lose. In the heart of the storm, Jackson stood firm, a captain at the helm of a ship that was more than metal and circuits. It was a living, breathing entity, bound by the shared will of those who called it home. The Syndicate ships, once so confident in their superiority, now scrambled to regroup, their formation faltering under the relentless assault. "Keep up the pressure," Jackson ordered, his voice carrying the weight of a man who'd finally found his stride. The Resolute danced through the chaos, its crew united by a common purpose, driven by the knowledge that they were fighting not just for survival, but for something more, for the ghost of a past that refused to be forgotten. And as the battle reached its crescendo, Jackson couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude for the ship, for his crew, and for the spectral presence of Iris Faulkner, whose guidance had sparked a flame that refused to be extinguished. The universe was a harsh, unforgiving place, but in that moment, amidst the chaos and destruction, Jackson knew one thing for certain: they were the crew of the Resolute, and they would persevere. As the last of the Syndicate ships retreated, the Resolute stood victorious, battered but unbroken. The crew cheered, their voices echoing through the ship like a triumphant chorus. Jackson allowed himself a moment of relief, but he knew their journey was far from over. The anomaly, the ghostly interference, the mysteries of the past, they still lingered, waiting to be unraveled. But for now, they had survived, and that was enough. "Good work, everyone," Jackson said, his voice steady, filled with a quiet pride. "Let's get to work repairing the ship. We've got a long road ahead." As the crew set about their tasks, Jackson lingered on the bridge, staring out at the stars. The universe, vast and unforgiving, was theirs to explore, its mysteries calling to them like a siren's song. And with the Resolute beneath him, its spirit as indomitable as ever, Jackson knew they would face whatever came next together. "Onward," he whispered to the void, a promise to the ship, to his crew, and to the ghostly presence that lingered in the wings, guiding them through the darkness. With a final glance at the stars, Jackson turned back to the bridge, ready to face whatever the universe had in store. Together, they would endure, for the Resolute was more than just a ship, it was home. The dim, flickering lights of the Resolute's bridge had taken on an ambience somewhere between a haunted house and a dive bar at last call. If the ship had any more personality, they'd be charging admission just to tour the place. Captain Jackson stood in the middle of this mess, trying to look as if he had everything under control, while the ship's systems continued to throw a tantrum worthy of a toddler hyped up on space candy. "We're moments away from breathing vacuum, and all you can do is smirk," Cass snapped, her fingers flying over the nav console like a pianist performing in a fire. Jackson shrugged. "If we can't find humor in impending doom, we're really in trouble." Cass didn't respond, but her glare could have melted titanium. The Resolute wasn't just shuffling them off its mortal coil, it was dragging them, kicking and screaming, into the void. Rook clung to his station, his usual sarcasm tempered by the grim reality that the life support was about as reliable as a politician's promise. "If we make it through this, I'm writing a thank you note to every engineer who decided redundant systems were a good idea. Talia, the ship's engineer, piped up through the comms. Redundant systems, that's optimistic. I'd settle for one that doesn't try to kill us every time we ask it to function. Speaking of which, Jackson interjected, how's the ghost hunting going? About as well as you'd expect when dealing with a spirit who's more interested in playing hide and seek than offering tech support, Talia replied, her voice laced with frustration. Maybe try asking nicely, Rook suggested with a grin. Maybe a seance or a bribe of ectoplasm cookies, Talia snorted. Next time I see a spectral handout, I'll be sure to grab some. Meanwhile, Cass was wrestling with what might have been the ship's version of a demonic possession. Captain, if you could focus less on stand-up comedy and more on not dying, that'd be great. Jackson nodded, the weight of the situation pressing down like a lead blanket. It was like trying to hold a pillow fight in a hurricane. Iris, he muttered, willing the ghostly presence to appear again, we need your help. We can't keep the ship together with duct tape and wishful thinking. The temperature dropped a few degrees, not quite enough to frost the consoles, but enough to raise goosebumps. Iris's image shimmered into being, her expression unreadable as ever. You're in quite the predicament, she noted, as if they were discussing the weather. Astute as always, Jackson replied, his voice tight. Any chance you could lend a hand before we all turn into space ice pops? Iris sighed, a sound like static over an old radio. The connection requires more than just willpower, Captain. It needs a sacrifice. The crew exchanged glances, the kind that screamed "oh hell no" without uttering a word. A sacrifice, Cass echoed, her tone as sharp as a laser scalpel. What kind of sacrifice are we talking about? The kind that doesn't involve livestock or virgins, I hope, Rook quipped, though his face was drawn with tension. Your fear, your doubts, Iris clarified. They feed the anomaly's power. You must offer them up, release them. I've got plenty of doubts to go around, Jackson said dryly, but we're running out of time to get all zen about it. Another shudder ran through the ship, the groan of stressed metal echoing like the death rattle of a space leviathan. Life support was choking, spluttering like a smoker on a treadmill. Talia's voice crackled over the intercom. We're losing atmosphere faster than a deflating balloon at a kid's party. Suggestions? Hope the air tastes better on the other side, Rook offered, his humor a brittle shield against the panic. Jackson took a deep breath, casting aside the gnawing tendrils of fear that wrapped around his spine like a constrictor. He had to believe that Iris wasn't leading them into oblivion just for kicks. All right, let's try this connection again. The crew watched him, a mixture of hope and skepticism mirrored in their eyes. Jackson closed his eyes, clearing his mind, or at least trying to. Thoughts continued to ricochet like pinballs, useless, frantic, and utterly unproductive. Clear your mind, Iris instructed, her voice soothing yet commanding. Let go of the fear. Yeah, because that's easy, Jackson muttered, struggling to suppress the torrent of anxiety that threatened to drown him. The ship seemed to pulse, a deep thrum that resonated through the bulkheads. A sensation of lightness washed over him, a feeling like stepping off a cliff and trusting the wind to catch you. Whoa, Cass whispered, as if afraid her voice might shatter whatever fragile thing was happening. Rook's fingers paused over the controls, his usual commentary replaced with silent anticipation. Even Talia, monitoring from engineering, held her breath. Jackson felt the connection snap into place, a surge of energy, not unlike the rush of adrenaline but cleaner, purer. The ship responded, systems stabilizing, the temperature normalizing as life support kicked back to life. Captain, you did it, Talia remarked, her voice tinged with something approaching awe. Jackson opened his eyes, the bridge coming into focus with a clarity that matched his newfound resolve. Let's keep moving. We've got more than Korath Syndicate goons to worry about. A warning alarm blared, the kind that usually preceded phrases like brace for impact and kiss your ass goodbye. We've got company, Cass said, her voice a study in controlled panic. And they look pissed. The alien ships were closing in, their formation tight, weapons primed. They were the kind of adversaries who played for keeps, and they just found their favorite chew toy. "Time to show them the Resolute isn't some cosmic punching bag," Jackson said, gripping the edge of the console like it was a lifeline. Rook grinned, the prospect of a fight bringing out his best. "Let's make them regret ever leaving their comfy little space stations." The Resolute sprang into action, dancing through the stars with a grace that defied its battered appearance. The ship's weapons flared, retaliating with a vengeance that spoke of pride and protectiveness. "Keep the pressure on," Jackson ordered, watching the tactical display with renewed confidence. "We're not going down without taking a few of them with us." The alien ships responded in kind, their barrage relentless, but the Resolute was no longer a wounded bird. It was a hawk, sharp, swift, and deadly. "Captain, we've got an opening," Cass called out, excitement threading through her voice. "They're breaking formation." "Punch through," Jackson commanded, feeling the exhilaration of a plan coming together, however haphazardly. "Let's show them what a cornered crew can do." The Resolute surged forward, exploiting the gap with calculated aggression. The alien ships scrambled, their cohesion shattered by the unanticipated assault. "We're through," Rook reported, his fingers flying over the controls. "They're regrouping, but we've got a head start." Jackson allowed himself a brief moment of triumph. They'd survived another round, and the ship felt more alive than it had in years, a testament to its resilience and the tenacity of those aboard. "Let's keep it that way," he murmured, a wry smile tugging at his lips. "But I'm still not writing us off the endangered species list yet." The crew shared a chuckle, the sound of balm against the ever-present tension. They were a ragtag bunch, flawed and frayed, but they were fighters. And as long as they had breath in their lungs and a ship beneath their feet, they'd keep fighting. "Captain," Talia's voice came through, a touch of urgency coloring it. "We've still got issues with the core. Iris might have stabilized things, but we're running on borrowed time." Jackson nodded, the weight of the situation settling back on his shoulders like an old coat. "Then let's not waste it. Cass, plot us the fastest route out of this mess. We need to regroup and repair." "Already on it," she replied, her focus unwavering. As the Resolute shot through the void, Jackson took a moment to appreciate the ship's stubbornness and the crew's resolve. They were family in the most dysfunctional sense, but family nonetheless. "Rook, keep an eye on our six. Talia, see if you can coax a bit more speed out of the engines." "Cass, stay sharp." "Don't worry, Cap," Rook said, a glint of mischief in his eye. "I've got your back, and next time maybe we'll find a star system that doesn't want to kill us." Jackson chuckled, a sound more genuine than before. "One can dream. Until then, let's keep this bucket of bolts flying." The crew settled into their roles, the familiar rhythm a comfort amid the chaos. Jackson knew they were far from safe, but with the Resolute beneath them and Iris's ghost in their corner, they had a fighting chance. As the stars blurred past, Jackson felt the resolve solidify within him. They would face whatever came next together, and come hell or high space, they'd make it through. In the vast, unforgiving expanse of space, they were the crew of the Resolute, and they weren't done yet. Not by a long shot. Jackson sat at the Resolute's bridge, staring at the viewscreen as if it might suddenly decide to broadcast a holiday special instead of impending doom. If he squinted just right, the incoming blips of enemy ships could almost be mistaken for festive decorations. Almost. Cass was hunched over at the nav console, muttering curses that would make a sailor blush. "If this hunk of junk doesn't start cooperating, I swear I'm gonna turn it into a very expensive meteor shower." "Easy there, Cass," Jackson said, forcing a grin. "No need to threaten the poor ship. We might need it to save our asses, remember." "Right. Because it's been doing such a stellar job so far," Cass shot back, her sarcasm as sharp as a laser blade. Rook, leaning against a wall as if he owned the place, chimed in. "Seriously, Cap, this ship's a drama queen. Every time we ask it to do something simple, it's like we're requesting a Broadway performance." Jackson chuckled despite himself. "Yeah, but it's our drama queen. And besides, I like to think of us as the doomed protagonists in a grim space opera." Talia's voice crackled over the intercom, tinged with the kind of exasperation only an engineer dealing with a temperamental spaceship could muster. "If you're done waxing poetic, Captain, I've got news from the engine room." "Do tell, Talia," Jackson prompted, trying to keep the mood light. "So, I've been tinkering with the engine's energy frequencies," she began, sounding like she was holding back a sigh the size of a small moon. "Turns out, if we can align them with the Ringworld's ambient signals, it might stabilize things enough to give us a fighting chance." "And by fighting chance, you mean?" Cass asked, glancing up with a raised eyebrow. "I mean we might not spontaneously combust the next time someone turns on the shower," Talia replied dryly. "Avoiding fiery death sounds like a win to me," Rook noted, tapping a control screen with a practiced nonchalance. Jackson leaned forward, hope flickering within him like a candle in a storm. "Okay, so how do we go about harmonizing these frequencies? And please tell me it doesn't involve interpretive dance." "More like a risky maneuver," Talia admitted, her voice still crackling over the intercom. "We need to fly closer to the Ringworld's core, close enough that the ship picks up the signals naturally." "Closer to the core," Jackson echoed, his brain replaying the words like a bad movie he couldn't switch off. "As in, closer to the thing that could fry us all like bacon." "Exactly," Talia confirmed brightly, as if she just told him they'd won a free pizza. Rook snorted. "Well, if we're going out, at least it'll be crispy." Jackson shook his head. "All right, let's assume we pull this off and don't end up as cosmic toast." "What do we do after? If we survive the maneuver," Talia continued, "we should be able to stabilize the ship long enough to make a real escape plan. Maybe even find a safe harbor." "Sounds like the kind of plan that's only slightly less suicidal than ignoring the problem," Cass commented, her voice dry as desert sands. "Exactly what I was going for," Talia replied, her tone managing to convey a shrug through the static. Jackson rubbed a hand over his face, feeling the weight of command like a particularly clingy ghost. "All right, crew, let's prep for this crazy stunt. Cass, plot us a course closer to the Ringworld's core. Rook, keep an eye on those approaching ships. Talia, hold the engines together with spit and prayers if you have to." "Always with the optimism, Cap?" Rook said with a smirk. "It's my defining trait," Jackson replied, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "Now let's get to it before I lose my nerve." The crew moved with the kind of efficiency that only a shared impending doom could inspire. Jackson watched them, pride mingling with the familiar tension. They were a motley bunch, but they were his motley bunch, and he'd take them over any pristine fleet any day. As the Resolute angled toward the Ringworld's core, Jackson felt his stomach do a flip that had nothing to do with zero gravity. The approaching signals were like a swarm of sharks, circling in for the kill. "Captain, we're getting close," Cass announced, her voice taut with concentration. "And here I thought we'd have time to stop for a cup of tea," Jackson replied, leaning forward as if it might help him see through the bulkheads. Talia's voice sounded again, this time with a grim edge. "We're losing power faster than expected. I don't know how much time we'll have once we hit the sweet spot." "No pressure, then," Jackson muttered, the burden of leadership sitting as comfortably as a porcupine in a hammock. The ship shuddered as they drew nearer to the core, a low thrum echoing through the hull like a heartbeat. Jackson could feel it, the connection just beyond their grasp, like trying to catch smoke with their bare hands. "Now, Jackson," Talia's voice cracked over the intercom, urgency sharpening each word. Jackson closed his eyes, focusing on the connection, willing it to snap into place. The ship's systems flickered, a dance of light and shadow that mirrored the chaos in his mind, and then like a lock turning, it clicked. The energy frequencies aligned, a symphony of power and potential that resonated through the ship, steadying it like an anchor in a storm. "We've got it," Talia confirmed, her voice breathless with relief. "We're stable. For now." "Well, butter my biscuits," Rook said, disbelief and relief mingling in his voice. "We actually did it." "Don't jinx it," Cass warned, casting a wary glance at the controls. Jackson exhaled, a long breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "All right, let's get out of here before our luck runs out." The Resolute pulled away from the Ringworld's core, its systems humming with a newfound harmony. The alien ships were still out there, but now they had a plan, a risky, half-baked plan, but a plan nonetheless. As they moved away from the core, the crew settled into a tense silence, each focused on their tasks, each knowing that their survival was still far from guaranteed. "Captain," Talia's voice came over the intercom again, softer now. "Thank you for trusting me." "For trusting us," Jackson nodded, even though she couldn't see it. "We're all in this together, Talia. I trust you because I know you've got the same goal, keeping this ship flying." "Yeah, and making sure we don't end up as interstellar roadkill," Rook added, his humor a welcome balm against the tension. Cass shot Jackson a look, her expression softening for a moment. "Nice speech, Cap. Almost makes me forget we're one wrong move away from disaster." "Almost," Jackson agreed, a small smile tugging at his lips. The Resolute sailed through the void, carrying them toward an uncertain future. They had a moment's respite, a fragile peace that could shatter at any moment. But for now they had hope, and in their line of work that was a rare and precious thing. Jackson allowed himself a moment to appreciate the calm, however temporary. They were still outnumbered, still hunted, and still flying by the seat of their pants, but they were alive. "All right, everyone," he said, his voice carrying the weight of both command and camaraderie. "Let's keep this ship together and see if we can find a nice, quiet corner of the universe to hide in for a bit." Quiet corner. "In this universe," Rook scoffed. "You'd have better luck finding a politician with integrity." Jackson laughed, the sound rich with the kind of defiance that came from facing the abyss and refusing to blink. "True enough, Rook, true enough." As the stars stretched out before them and the threat of the Korath Syndicate loomed ever larger, Jackson felt a sense of determination settle over him. They weren't done yet, not by a long shot. With the Resolute beneath them and Iris's spectral assistance, they had a fighting chance. And as long as they had that, they would keep fighting, keep surviving, and keep defying the odds. Because that, after all, was the essence of the Resolute. Stubborn, scrappy, and never going down without a hell of a fight. The Resolute hummed with a newfound stability, but Jackson knew better than to take it for granted. Like a house of cards built on a trampoline, it could all come crashing down at the slightest nudge. He paced the bridge with the nervous energy of a caffeinated squirge, eyes flicking to the blips on the screen. Korath Syndicate ships, hungry for their prize. Cass was still glued to the nav console, weaving them through space like a drunk trying to dodge potholes. "I swear, Cap, if we survive this, I'm getting a tattoo that says I survived the Resolute." Rook, lounging in his usual spot as if gravity was a mere suggestion, piped up. "Make sure to leave room for Volume 2, I survived Jackson's plans." "Both solid choices," Jackson replied, trying to suppress a grin. "Now, let's see if we can avoid becoming a footnote in someone else's memoir." Talia chimed in over the intercom, her voice still carrying the crisp, frayed edges of an engineer perpetually on the brink of snapping. "Engines are holding, but they are as stable as a politician's promise. We need to make contact soon if we want a chance in hell." Jackson nodded, more to himself than anyone else, and opened a channel to the spectral presence haunting their ship. "Iris, I know you're out there. We could use a little guidance right about now." The ship's lights flickered, a sign that Iris was listening, or maybe just another quirk of their temperamental bucket of bolts. Either way, Jackson took it as a good omen. Or at least not a terrible one. A soft voice echoed through the Resolute, a whisper carried on a breeze that shouldn't exist in the vacuum of space. "You seek the dark matter, but at what cost?" Cass rolled her eyes, muttering to herself, "Great, a ghost with a flair for drama." Jackson ignored the aside, focusing on the task at hand. "We're looking for a way out, Iris. The dark matter could help us, but we won't get far if these syndicate goons turn us into space debris." The voice sighed, a sound like wind through dead leaves. "I was like you once, chasing shadows, dreaming of escape, but the syndicate, they took everything." "So what? We should just give up and wait for a swift and gruesome end," Rook interjected, his sarcasm masking a genuine question. No, Iris replied, her tone softening. But you can't defeat them with bravado alone. Sometimes you must embrace what haunts you. I'm not sure I like the sound of that, Cass muttered, fingers dancing over the console. Jackson considered her words, his mind working like a rusty cog. If we embrace the haunting, can you help us turn the tables on them? There was a pause, the kind that stretched longer than a politician's answer. Then the lights dimmed, and Iris's presence became more palpable, as if she was gathering her strength. Yes, but you must trust me, trust the ship. Talia's voice crackled over the comms, thick with skepticism. Trust the ship. Iris, I'm the one who talks to this beast daily, and trust isn't exactly in our relationship status. Think of it as therapeutic reconciliation, Iris replied, a hint of humor threading through the spectral tones. Jackson sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. All right, team, I say we go with it. Trust Iris. Trust the Resolute. Trust. Well, not the Syndicate, obviously, Cass snorted. Sounds like the setup to a really bad joke. Or a really good one, Rook countered. Depending on your sense of humor, with a collective deep breath. Because one thing they could still do well was breathe. The crew prepared for the next step in their half-cocked plan. The Resolute, now carrying the weight of spectral allies and human determination, headed toward its fateful meeting. As they approached the coordinates Iris had suggested, the ship started to vibrate, a gentle hum that grew into a resonant chorus. Jackson felt it in his bones, an otherworldly symphony that threatened to shake him apart, yet somehow held him together. Feels like we're riding a sentient tuning fork, Cass muttered, adjusting their course with deft precision. Let's hope it's not in the key of explosive decompression, Jackson replied, his grip tightening on his chair's armrests. The Syndicate ships were closing in, drawn like moths to the flame of their desperation. But Iris's influence was growing, a shield woven from the strands of her past, insulating them from the worst of the encroaching threat. Don't look now, but I think we've got ourselves a ghostly guardian angel, Rook quipped, nodding toward the sensors. More like a spectral babysitter, Cass corrected, keeping us out of trouble, or at least trying to. Jackson focused on the situation, pushing aside the chatter. Iris, any chance you can give us a bit more than just moral support? Her laughter echoed through the ship, warm and knowing. I can do more than that. Channel your hopes, your fears into the ship. Let it carry the weight. Talia's voice cut in, full of urgency and not a small amount of incredulity. I hope this doesn't end with us on a one-way trip to oblivion, but hey, I'm game. Trust, Talia, Jackson said, feeling the irony of his own words. Trust. With Talia and the crew pouring their collective will into the Resolute, the ship responded. It was subtle at first, a slight shift in the energy patterns, a smoother glide through the void. Then it became something more. The Korath Syndicate ships faltered, their cohesion disrupted by an unseen force. Their formation broke, confusion rippling through their ranks like a virus. Well, I'll be damned, Rook said, genuine surprise coloring his tone. It's actually working. Don't sound so shocked, Cass shot back. We're miracle workers, remember. Jackson allowed himself a moment of hope, a fleeting sensation quickly tempered by the reality of their situation. Stay sharp, everyone. We're not out of this yet. The Resolute continued its dance, a graceful waltz that belied its patched-together skeleton. With Iris's guidance and the crew's determination, they skirted disaster, weaving through the chaos with the kind of luck that bordered on divine intervention, or perhaps something else entirely. As they neared the dark matter deposit, Iris spoke once more, her voice stronger, more assured. You've done well, but there is one last task. The dark matter, if you harness it correctly, you can secure your freedom. And how do we do that without blowing ourselves up? Jackson asked, wary of the potential for catastrophic failure. Simple, Iris replied, her tone suggesting it was anything but. You must align your intentions with the ship. Let go of your doubts. Align our intentions, Cass repeated, skepticism dripping from every word. We're a bunch of misfits held together by duct tape and sarcasm. What intentions are we supposed to align? Survival, Iris answered. Hope, The belief that you can change your fate. Rook gave a low chuckle. A bit heavy-handed for my taste, but I guess it's better than the alternative. With no time to lose, Jackson nodded, accepting the strange wisdom offered by their ghostly companion. All right, team. Let's make it happen. The crew focused, channeling their collective desires into the ship. The Resolute thrummed with energy, responding to their combined will. The dark matter, volatile yet full of potential, glowed with an inner light, promising salvation in its unpredictable embrace. As the energy coursed through the ship, Iris's presence became a comforting weight, a reminder that they were not alone in their struggle. The Syndicate ships, sensing the shift, moved to intercept, but they were too late. The Resolute, buoyed by the dark matter and Iris's guidance, surged forward, a comet of defiance streaking through the stars. Jackson could feel the change, a palpable shift in their fortunes. The odds stacked against them for so long had finally tilted in their favor. "Looks like we've got our window," Jackson announced, a rare note of triumph in his voice. Cass grinned, her fingers flying over the controls with practiced ease. "Time to make our grand exit, then." The Resolute shot forward, leaving the Syndicate ships scrambling to react. With the dark matter secured and the haunting resolved, they had one mission left: escape. Talia's voice crackled over the intercom, relief and exhaustion mingling. "Engines are holding, but they're gonna need some serious TLC once we're out of here." "We'll give them the spa treatment they deserve," Rook promised, still watching the sensor readouts with a critical eye. As they raced toward freedom, Jackson allowed himself a moment of reflection. They'd faced down the impossible, turned a haunting into an ally, and outsmarted the Korath Syndicate. It wasn't a clean victory, but it was theirs. "Captain," Iris's voice echoed one last time, tinged with gratitude and farewell. "Thank you for setting me free." Jackson nodded, a small smile playing at his lips. "Thank you, Iris, for everything." With that, her presence faded, leaving behind a ship that hummed with life and a crew that had emerged stronger for their trials. As the Resolute sailed away from danger, Jackson glanced at his crew, a motley group bound by loyalty and the shared experience of survival. "All right, folks," he said, his voice carrying the weight of command and camaraderie. "Let's get to that quiet corner of the universe." "We've earned it," Rook chuckled, the sound full of warmth. "As long as we don't have to dodge any more ghosts along the way." Cass smirked, her eyes dancing with mischief. "Or Syndicate ships, or malfunctioning equipment, or—" all right," Jackson interrupted, laughter bubbling up despite himself. "Let's just focus on getting there first." With the Resolute beneath them, thrumming with potential and promise, they moved forward, ready to face whatever the universe dared to throw their way next. The Resolute cruised away from the Ringworld, a rusted bucket of bolts that somehow still managed to fly. Jackson sat in the captain's chair, the cushion long past its prime and the springs poking up in ways that made him consider bringing back corporal punishment. He watched the starfield through the cracked viewport, feeling a rare moment of calm, like sitting in a broken chair, and realizing it's somehow more comfortable than the new one. Cass, hunched over the nav console, looked up with her trademark smirk. "So, Captain, what's next on our list of bad decisions? I hear there's a black hole nearby. We could go poke it with a stick." Jackson snorted, a sound halfway between amusement and resignation. "Tempting, but I think we've had enough of cosmic suicide missions for one lifetime. Let's try not to get killed, just until after lunch at least." Rook sat casually, legs up on the secondary console. He toyed with a screwdriver, spinning it between his fingers like a lazy juggler. "You know, I'm starting to miss Iris already. Nothing like a ship-haunting ghost to keep the adrenaline pumping." Cass rolled her eyes. "Yeah, well, I won't miss her singing boo in my ear while I'm making course adjustments." "At least she had good taste in music," Rook countered with a grin. "Remember that time she cranked up the old Earth rock during that asteroid dodgeball session?" Cass chuckled. "Yeah, nothing like dodging space debris to the tune of Highway to Hell. Appropriate if you ask me." Jackson, feeling the camaraderie seeping through the ship like a warm, albeit slightly dysfunctional, blanket, allowed himself a small smile. "All right, team, settle down. We've got more important things to worry about. Like how do we make sure the Korath Syndicate doesn't come knocking again?" Talia's voice piped up through the comms, muffled by the machinery she was elbow-deep in. "I could rig the engines to explode next time they show up. Give him a real surprise party. While I appreciate your enthusiasm for pyrotechnics, let's keep that as Plan Z," Jackson replied, rubbing his temples. "Preferably after plans A through Y haven't killed us." "Speaking of plans," Cass interjected, "what about Iris? We owe it to her to tell her story. Might piss off the Syndicate, but hey, what's life without a little danger?" Rook nodded, his expression uncharacteristically serious. "She saved our asses. Least we can do is make sure she's not forgotten." Jackson considered this, chewing it over like a piece of old gum. "Yeah, we'll find a way to get the word out. Maybe we can drop a few hints in the right places, let her legend grow. Who knows, maybe she'll become the cautionary tale kids tell while hiding under their blankets." Cass grinned. "Yeah, like if you don't behave, Iris the ghost will come and mess with your hyperdrive." Rook snickered. "Beats the hell out of eat your vegetables." With the specter of Iris fading into memory, the crew turned their attention back to the here and now. The Resolute, for all its faults and quirks, felt alive in a way Jackson hadn't noticed before. Maybe it was the ghostly influence, or maybe it was the sense of having narrowly avoided becoming space dust. Whatever it was, it felt like home, if home was a ramshackle spaceship held together by luck and duct tape. The ship's internal lights flickered, a soft reminder of the ongoing battle with its own systems. Jackson leaned back, staring at the ceiling. "You think maybe the ship liked Iris because she was dead? You know, kindred spirits, quite literally." Cass shrugged. "It would explain the mood swings." Talia's voice crackled over the intercom again. "Speaking of mood swings, the engines are still moody, but I think I can keep them purring, as long as no one breathes on them too hard." "Good to know," Jackson replied. "We'll try to keep our respiratory activities to a minimum." Rook tossed the screwdriver onto the console, getting up to stretch. "So when do we get to the quiet corner of the universe you promised? I could use a sip of something strong and something that doesn't taste like recycled despair." Cass tapped a few keys on the nav console. "We're headed for the Arcturus Drift. Quiet enough for ya. Just don't expect porcelain teacups and cucumber sandwiches." Rook groaned theatrically. "And here I was hoping for a 5-star retreat." "Set your expectations low enough, and you'll always be pleasantly surprised," Jackson quipped. As the Resolute carved its path through the stars, the crew settled into a comfortable rhythm of banter and routine. The kind of routine that, while liable to be interrupted by unexpected explosions or spectral visitations, was theirs. They embraced it with the same enthusiasm a prisoner might have for his cellmate. It wasn't ideal, but at least it wasn't deadly. Jackson found himself in the mess hall, nursing a cup of what Talia generously called coffee. It had the consistency of engine oil and the flavor of a mechanic's rag, but it was warm. He sat back, letting the silence of space seep in, broken only by the occasional clatter of a loose panel or the distant hum of the engines. Cass joined him, sliding into the seat opposite. "You really think we'll get away from the Syndicate?" "I mean, really," Jackson pondered, considering the odds. They weren't good, but then again, they never were. "I think we've got a shot. Especially if we keep our heads down and our wits sharp," Cass snorted. "You mean if we stay lucky?" "Luck's just another word for preparation meeting opportunity," Jackson replied, though even he wasn't sure if he believed it. Rook joined them, carrying a repair kit and a smile that suggested he was up to something. "Guess what, folks? The coffee maker is fixed." Jackson raised an eyebrow. "Did it involve more duct tape and wishful thinking?" Rook shook his head, looking almost affronted. "Nah, this time it was pure genius. I rerouted the power from the cargo bay lights, so you know maybe don't open any crates without a flashlight." Cass laughed. "Genius is stretching it, but hey, at least we won't electrocute ourselves trying to get a caffeine fix." Jackson sipped his cup of sludge. "Here's to small victories." The quiet moments stretched, a rare luxury aboard a ship that usually felt like it was one bad day away from implosion. Jackson closed his eyes, listening to the comforting symphony of distant stars and the steady heartbeat of the Resolute. Talia walked in, wiping grease from her hands. "Engines are stable for now. But if they start singing La Cucaracha again, I'm officially resigning." Jackson chuckled, raising his cup in salute. "Noted. Consider yourself our first line of defense against musical engines." Rook leaned back, gazing at the ceiling. "You know, I think we might actually pull this off. I mean, how many crews can say they've outrun the Korath Syndicate and live to tell about it?" Cass grinned. "We should get t-shirts made. I survived the Resolute's ghost and all I got was this lousy existential crisis." "Merchandise for the masses," Jackson added, the corners of his mouth twitching upwards. "We'd make a killing." The easy banter fell into comfortable silence, the kind that only came with shared experiences and the knowledge that whatever lay ahead, they'd face it together. They were a crew, mismatched and misfit, yet somehow more than the sum of their parts. As the stars streaked by outside, Jackson allowed himself a moment of reflection, thinking of Iris and the strange journey they'd taken. Her presence had been a catalyst, a light under the ass that had spurred them into action, into survival. "To Iris," he said, raising his mug. The crew echoed the toast, voices mingling in the small space, a tribute to their spectral ally. The Resolute continued its course, cutting through the vast emptiness of space with a purpose that felt new, invigorated. They were heading toward the Arcturus Drift, a place far enough from Syndicate reach and nearer to the freedom they all craved, even if it was just temporary. But for now, that was enough. The crew was alive, the ship was holding together, and they had a story to tell, a ghost story that was more about life than death. As the last of Iris's presence faded into the cold void, the warmth of her memory lingered, an invisible companion on their journey. Jackson stood, feeling the weight of command and camaraderie settle comfortably on his shoulders. "All right, folks, let's get ready for a new chapter. It might be quieter, but knowing us, probably not for long." The crew laughed, a sound full of determination and irreverence, like a group of misfits who'd taken on the universe and come out the other side, bruised but unbeaten. As the Resolute sailed forward, it carried the echoes of its spectral past and the promise of its uncertain future, bound together by the stubborn resilience of its crew. In that moment, Jackson knew they'd be all right, at least until the next disaster rolled around. But that was a worry for another day. For now, they had time, and in space, time was as precious as the stars themselves. Time to heal, to laugh, and to live. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough.